You're listening to the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. This episode is titled Intrinsic Raditude is the Attitude. Now, you're probably wondering, Jim, what the heck is Raditude? Well, it's my word amalgamation for radical gratitude. And then you might also be wondering about the word, what's intrinsic gratitude? Well, you already know what gratitude is. And Ratitude is radical gratitude, as I just stated. And what intrinsic is intrinsic is you and the most profound you from the most profound levels of you. Basically, it's operating from the intrinsic being that you are. And when you operate from the intrinsic being that you are, and you have gratitude, then you're in what I call Raditude. And this will transform your life. Keep listening.
Hi, I'm Jim Fortin, and you're about to start transforming your life from the inside out with this podcast. I'm widely considered the leader in subconscious transformation, and I've coached super achievers all around the world for over 25 years. Here, you're going to find no rah-rah motivation and no hype, because this podcast is a combination of brain science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom all rolled into one to take your life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting a lot more in life, to feel better, to heal, to have peace of mind, to feel powerful and alive, and to bring more abundance and prosperity into your life, then this podcast is for you, because you're going to start learning how to master your mind and evolve your consciousness. And when you do that, anything you want then becomes possible for you. I'm glad you're here.
Okay, so you're probably wondering, Jim, why will it change my life? Well, for two reasons. One, and I've talked about, 4, 5, 6 times on this podcast, different places, about the physics experiment called the double slit experiment. Basically, what that experiment demonstrates is that the physical world bends to our consciousness. So think about that for a moment. If you're thinking about all the things that you're grateful for, and you hold that in your consciousness, the physical world will bend to that. And then secondly, as you know, gratitude changes. It changes your emotional state. It changes, your way of being. So think about that for a moment. If you were in Ratitude, how would that affect? You were in just radical gratitude. How would that affect your way of being and your internal state? And what if you lived in Ratitude all the time? How would that change your life? Now, I don't know about you, but I know a lot of us are the same. And, I work with many, 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 many people. And we're all kind of the same. And I see this in so many people. But let me share a story with you. And the reason that I tell you that is I used to give lip service to gratitude. We're taught as kids, every time somebody, I was, and most of us are, when somebody gives you something, your mom would say, if you just took it, your mom would say, what do you say? And you say, thank you. Well, you say thank you, in gratitude. And I always thought, because it's the way I'm supposed to answer, when people would say, are you grateful? I would say, of course I'm grateful. Not ever really fully immersing in gratitude. I remember, I'm going to mention Don Javier a few times on this podcast, my brother-in-law. I remember 21 years ago, when I moved back from New York City to Dallas. I didn't have a car because I didn't need one in New York City. And the very first week that I was back, I went and bought a new Ford Bronco. And that was probably on a Monday or so. And I saw him Saturday night. And we were sitting on the back porch. And he used to call me cuñado, which he's from Mexico, and that's Spanish for brother-in-law. And he was sitting there, and it's pretty quiet out. It's a starry night, and it's quiet, and we're just sitting outside. And he said, brother-in-law, cuñado, are you grateful for your new car? And I said, yes, I am. And then I said, but it drinks a lot of gas. And he just nodded his head and he didn't say anything. And I just sat there and he sat there. And then he says, very good. Very good. He goes, you have perfect health, a beautiful family. You've got your own company. You've got money in the bank. You've got pretty much anything that anybody could want. You got a brand new car, for crying out loud. And you still find something to complain about. And talk about like a Muhammad Ali knockout. I was like, boom, talk about, whoa, knocked out. And even my brother was sitting next to me and he goes, you know what? I bet you didn't see that coming. And he's right. He's right, because I lived so many years like that. I wasn't grateful for everything I had, and especially this brand new car in front of me. I wasn't grateful for it. And I know as you're listening, a lot of you, if not almost all of you, can resonate with that, because we have so much in the West. I mean, I've read before something like if you've got, a roof over your head and food, you're better off than 90% of the population. And how grateful are you for that on a daily basis? The way that most of us live is we live from just never enough, more and more and more, never enough. And then people say, are you grateful? Oh, yes, I'm grateful. Not even recognizing that we're not. I saw Oprah one time, and I think she was repeating Maya Angelou. But Oprah used to say, gratitude is the attitude. And that's catchy. Yeah, it's really catchy. I mean, come on, gratitude is the attitude. And we all want to think that as I said, we all want to think that we're grateful. Having gratitude will, and yet if you live from that place, it'll change your life. But if you have Ratitude and you're radically grateful for what you have in your life, that will transform your life. Hence, the title of this episode, obviously, is Intrinsic Raditude. As I mention these things and I mention our ways of being, think really quickly. I'll give you, a few seconds. I want you in your mind right now to name 3 things that you're grateful for. Okay? Quick, do it. 3 things you're grateful for. What is 1? What is 2? What is 3? And when I talk about intrinsic a little deeper, I guarantee you that most of you, if not all of you, didn't even nail one thing that you're intrinsically grateful for, which I'll demonstrate in just a minute. But all of you, if we go to the old go-to things and we say, oh, that's easy. My family, which is where most of us go. And then we'll pick, things. And for me, a long time ago, it wasn't the new car. But we'll say my home or my, this or that, or having shelter or food or something. Generally speaking, we'll pick something external. But what we're never really looking at for most of us, and I can say this when I'm generalizing here, when I say most of us, most often never do this, or always when I'm using those qualifiers, is because I observe people and I observe myself. And just by watching myself, I can see people. And being in the world, you can see a lot of this. But what most of you probably never went to, I bet none of you, as I was alluding to, none of you said, I'm grateful for my eyes, or I'm grateful for my heartbeat, or I'm grateful for my lungs, or my sense of smell, or my ability to stand, or my ability to run, and even plain and simple, my ability to pick up a fork or a spoon or a marble. Think about that. Those are what I call intrinsic gratitude. They're basically things that we can do as a result of being born, which most of us have, not all of us, because not all of us are sighted or can hear, etc. Yet most of us are born with faculties like this, the senses. Yet we're not intrinsically grateful. Let me say that differently. We're not grateful for the intrinsic senses that we have. And like I said, we pick the external things, which they are external, family and friends and money and home. But those are all things outside of us. But what about the things inside of us? What about the ability to function well? What about this? And I wonder how many of you thought about this. How many of you are grateful? And when I say the word, you're going to say, oh, yep, that's me. But how many of you did that word pop right to the front of your consciousness? How many of you are grateful for your health? And that's a big one. And what I've learned the past years, which I'm healing, and I'm healing and becoming extremely healthy, is that if you don't have your health, seriously, you don't have anything. You can have a lot of money and all the brand new cars you want. And if you don't feel good, it doesn't mean anything to you. But see, your health, most of us, not all, but most of us are born intrinsically, at least in the West, we're born intrinsically healthy or the ability to be healthy. So the question is, just ponder that. Are you intrinsically really grateful for everything that you have in your life? Because once we reach that place, we then become, and I can't explain it. I wish I could put it into words, but I can't. You have to experience it. But once you become intrinsically grateful at a deep level, we become what I call infused. We become infused into life with the essence of our being. And I'm going to use a word here that I've learned by working with a shaman over the years. And I've been, I've worked with him for 25 years, and I was going to use the word taught. It's not the right word, but I'll use the word taught anyway. He's taught me about what is called your second attention, how to see the energy coming out of water and people and things, and how to commune with nature and trees and birds and animals. But the word that I was going to use is commune, because once we become intrinsically grateful for things that we're intrinsically born with, we start communing with the deeper functions of life. We start communing with the essence of everything. And that is power. Okay, let me segue from the podcast for just 1 minute. The fact that you're here listening to my podcast means that you're serious about transforming your life from the inside out. Now, that being said, you're going to want to mark your calendar, because I'm doing a live no-charge training starting on March the 4th. It's a 3-part transformational training, and it's called the Be, Do, Have series. And what we're going to do is we're going to dig deeper into the ways of identity that you need to be so that you can actually change the things you need to change so that you can have the health and the wealth and the success and the money and all the things that you want. So whatever you do, mark your calendar for March the 4th, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, and visit jimfortin.com/be-to-have. And again, whatever you do right now, get registered for this no-charge training. Okay, back to the episode. So what I want to say is living in gratitude changes who you are. And when you live in hopefully the Ratitude, which we're going to talk about some more here, and I'm going to give you an exercise at the end of this podcast, something that I know will give you an instant aha, pretty much every one of you listening. But once we live in Ratitude and we are being in Ratitude, guess what? Because of the double slit experiment, which I started with and I mentioned before, the universe and life start reflecting that back to you. Okay, so how did I come to these realizations and these what I call knowings? And you probably heard me say before, there's a difference between knowing and understanding. We all understand what gratitude is, but do you know what gratitude is? And working with Don Javier for many, many years, in 2012, December 21st, 2012, I woke up throwing up. Now, as I'm going to go on with this story, listen to the date that I said, December 21st, 2012. I woke up that morning and I was supposed to go to Boulder, Colorado to start looking at some homes. I wanted to move to Boulder, Colorado. And I woke up at 7 a.m. that morning and I was just violently throwing up and dry heaving. And I thought, I'll feel better by later today. And I was supposed to head to the airport around 3 or 4 p.m. I was still throwing up and I was sick, like I had the flu, but I knew it wasn't the flu. And as it worked out, I didn't go to Boulder. And my brother-in-law called me that night and he goes, well, I guess you were not supposed to be in the air today. Now, again, December 21st, 2012. That is the day that what we know as the Mayan calendar ended. We are currently in what's called the time of no time. And it's also the winter solstice. So, or equinox. Anyway, one of those two. I always mix those two words up. But it's seasonal change. And my life changed the day that happened because I started feeling energy. And for 3 years, I felt tremendous energies. And I can go into it more here. I won't, because I want to continue with what I'm talking about, the Ratitude, and apply that to your life. But I spent 3 years not knowing whether I was going to live or die. I just felt bad all the time, and I had blood work and everything done, all this test. And the doctors are like, you're perfectly healthy. We find nothing wrong with you. Yet I would just go through these days where I was just ill. And long story very short, he said to me, my brother-in-law, is like, it's energy. You have to learn to manage the energy. It took about 3 years, and I finally started learning the hard way, and taking me longer than what it could have. And I started learning that it was all energy. But what I want to point out, and the reason I tell you this story, is that's when I started learning. You know what? I had air quote good days and bad days. And prior to that, in my life, I haven't had a prescription since 1992, 20 years prior, thereabouts, or however many years, a lot of years. And I took feeling good for granted. I took my health for granted. And when that started happening to me, I had good days and I had bad days. And I started recognizing, wow, on the days that I have good days, I really, really appreciate, the good days. And working with him for so many years, it's a hard path working with a shaman. It really, really is. I mean, far more than I show. And people have said, you're so lucky to be working with a real shaman, your brother-in-law. And I'm like, yes, I'm extraordinarily grateful for that. However, there comes a price with that. And what they don't see is that everyone that works with him will attest to this and can say this, all of us in the inner circle. It's a tough road sometimes because you can feel the moon cycles and the lunar cycles and the solar flares and things happening on the planet. You can start feeling these things, and trust me, it's dishevelment. And it can be very disconcerting physically, and we have to learn to manage it. So anyway, those are my lessons, but that's how I came to this and to the intrinsic part of it. But how I came to the intrinsic part of it is, if you've been listening at all, for some time, I work with a shaman, as I said, and I've been learning also for a lot of years. And in Ayurveda, this is where I learned this. And my brother-in-law, I learned from him through example, but I learned the mechanics in Ayurveda. When he actually started, talking to me about this, I started learning elsewhere, because he's not a teacher; he's a doer. He just does what he does, and it's my job to learn whatever I pick up. But in Ayurveda, which is ancient Indian, they talk about this concept about, for example, just sitting down and meditating and having gratitude for breathing. I was going to breathe in and then I stopped halfway through, but for breathing and for your heartbeat. Now, that being said, do you have gratitude for your heart? Because there are many people that have a bad heart, right? Do you have gratitude that you can breathe and breathe well, and you can run and you can jog? There are many people that have lung disease or have different things. Trust me, they would love to walk a mile, yet you can do it in your sleep, metaphorically speaking. Well, I guess you could do it in your sleep too, and people sleepwalk, but you know what I mean. That's the intrinsic part that I mean, and I'm being a little, I'm saying things redundant in different ways because I want you to fully understand this. But when I got that many years ago, I'd recognized that in meditation and etc., which is a whole different, episode I could record, because meditation is not what people think that it is. Most people think to sit down and go om, metaphorically speaking, and as an example, as meditating. That's not. That's simply disconnecting from the world, but yet we are a being that exists in consciousness. So we can never disconnect from that. Anyway, back to here. So anyway, that's where I started learning this, back in 2012 and embodying it over the years. But everything that I just said, I said for a reason, because working with him can be very, very challenging. And a while back, I experienced all these air quote weird symptoms working with him, and I have for, again, 20 something years. It's normal this day and age. I mean, there have been days that I'm like, I should go to the ER. And I've called him and he's like, you can go. They're not going to find anything. And he goes, do what I tell you to do. You'll be fine tomorrow. And that's always been the case. Always. And a while back, my hands were numb. And one morning I woke up and my right hand was numb as if I didn't have a right hand. Completely like, no feeling, none. You could have run over my right hand with a car and I would have not have felt it. And it came back almost instantly, but it wasn't as if, for example, you're sleeping and you can feel all the pins and needles. It wasn't like that. It was simply almost kind of miraculous. And it happened at 4 a.m. And I almost texted him and I didn't. And I had dinner with him the next night. And I texted him the next day about that. And I saw him for dinner and he started laughing at me. He's like, I'm experiencing the same thing. And then he went into different things, which I won't go into this podcast, is that we can feel sorry for ourselves. We can get into fear. We can get into all these things. But the reason I'm sharing this is what dawned on me. And here's the purpose of everything that I'm getting to is it only lasted for a few minutes. And I've learned also over the years that things like this come and go. And it might happen for a month, 2 months, 3 months in a row. Every day, every 7 days, every 14. You never know. It's random. And then it never happens again for a lifetime. And so many things have happened that I'm used to it. Everyone that works with it, we're used to it. So I haven't had it. I had it 2 nights. And the next night, it was not as bad, but I had it. Now, the point of the podcast is I literally had no feeling in the hand. And I'm like, do I have use of my hand? And that's when this podcast hit me, is I've not had gratitude for simple things like my hand and my hands, everything that my hands do, and my ability, number one, that I even have hands. And secondly, what can my hands do? And I thought about, and this is when it dawned on me, and this is where the idea for this episode came up a long time ago. And I've been waiting for quite some time to record this particular episode. But I thought, what if I had no hands? Now, I'm going to put that question back on you. So let me be generous. You can keep one, but what if you lost one of your hands? Think about that for a moment. Just consider. I don't really want you to really imagine it because I don't want your consciousness to go there. But let me give you some external tangibles. If you didn't have a right hand, actually, this is what I want you to do. Pick your dominant hand, left or right. Now, if you didn't have that dominant hand, would you be able to button a shirt? How about this? Picking up a fork. How about this? Brushing your teeth. Or what about leaning over and using your thumb and forefinger to pick up a penny off the ground? Or even more importantly, if you didn't have a predominant hand, which I'm just joking here, I'm just kidding. How are you going to click on your phone all day long? I mean, you've got to train yourself to use your other hand to click on your phone and your apps and everything else, and especially my podcast. So think for a moment about all the things that you do with your hands. Now, I do want to send out a caveat here is to all of our brothers and sisters that have lost a hand somewhere, and maybe in war and they don't have a hand or they've lost function. And I'm telling you, they, for the most part, understand what I'm talking about, but I also want to say what I'm saying to everyone else might apply to them, is that what you do have extreme gratitude for it. Okay, let's do some rubber meets the road here. Let's make this very tangible. This is something I came up with a while back, and I came up with it because I was watching a movie a long while back, and for some reason I was watching a movie about somebody that was handicapped. And then I read something online about it like an hour later, and I'm like, boom, okay, that's an omen. That's a sign. And it wasn't the movie, it was a YouTube video. And a guy said in the video, if you want to know what it's like to be handicapped with your hands, put a sock on your hand and wear the sock. You can't use that hand. Because if I just told all of you right now, you know what? You can't use your hand for an hour or half a day or whatever, you're going to do what we all do. You're going to forget like in 3 minutes after you click off the podcast. But here's what I want you to do. And I've thought through this. And I want you to do this today. I want you to do it now if you can, because if not, you'll probably forget. You may forget. That's what we tend to do is we get busy, we get distracted, and we move our attention. But right now, if you can, or you're at home or somewhere that you can do this, I want you to get a sock. And I want you to put that sock on your hand for 1 hour. And I thought about, well, I should say 2 hours or 3 hours or no, 1 hour. And the reason why, because I did this a while back to test it out. Seriously, before I say anything on the podcast, also, I make things work. And I did test this out a while back, is I put a sock on my hand and I started taking a shower. And I'm like, okay, I got to keep my sock dry, and I could have gotten it wet, but I had no use of my dominant hand in the shower. Trust me, it's not as easy to take a shower, and you can think, well, you can wash with your other hand. Yes, you can. But have you ever, being a little transparent here, have you ever tried to wash your armpit on, let's say, the left-hand side with your left hand? I mean, you got to contort a little bit, and I'm just giving you an example there. But that's your homework this week. That is your homework. Is I want you to think about, doing this and the implications for you, because when you do it, the old Chinese proverb is something like, I'm going to mess it up, so I'm not even going to say it. But we learn by doing, by immersing. And we get that like realization when we immerse ourselves. So what I want you to do is get the sock, put it on your hand for 1 hour. And you cannot use that hand for 1 hour. And if you're anything like me, you're going to recognize that literally within 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, geez, I didn't recognize that I used my hand that much. And becomes apparent to you. But I want you to do the hour, not just so it becomes apparent in a few minutes. I want you to do the hour so you're fully immersed in that 1 hour without your dominant hand. And that in itself will help you know what it's like. Okay, so there you have it, but I'm going to give you more here, so stay with me, okay? I'm going to talk about some things that we can do to start becoming, through habit, a grateful person and living from gratitude. But you've got your homework. You know what it is. I'm really curious. I wish I could talk to you personally because I'd love to hear, the outcome of your experience of you doing this. But I promise you, do it for an hour. You'll have a different perspective on your hand. And then obviously recognize is the whole key here in this episode is learning to be grateful for your hand. But not just your hand, obviously, as I talked about earlier. I mean, your breathing and your lungs and your toes. So I started a long time ago. I would sit down in the morning and I would literally like scan my body and just say, I'm grateful. I'm grateful. Thank you, hands. Thank you, fingernails. Thank you, elbow. Thank you, knee, but I would start, I wouldn't do randomly because I'd skip over and forget. I would just start top of my head and just go down my body And I wouldn't thank every organ. I mean, I would focus sometimes on an organ, but I wouldn't focus on every organ going, okay, let me thank my liver, let me thank my spleen, let me thank my pancreas. I wouldn't do that. But I'd say, you know what? Let me just be grateful. And I'm grateful for all of my vital organs that function well and they're healthy. And thank you for my bone structure and my skin and this and that, and go through. And I would do it for 2 or 3 minutes. Doing that will create more awareness for you. But the main thing is do it every day. And well, I'm going to talk about that here in a second. Do it every day and start habituating gratitude, because then it becomes Ratitude, because you become radically grateful for things that you have in your life. Okay, before I share a few more ideas with you here, speaking of gratitude, if you've listened for any amount of time and you're grateful for the podcast, please share. Even though I record, the episodes, it's a lot of work. And I mean a lot of work for my team to do this. Everything from my podcast editor. And honestly, we don't edit a lot. I mean, 99% of the time, I just put on the microphone and chat. I don't really care about making it perfect because that doesn't exist. But my team and everything else. And if this will help you, it will help other people. So please pay it forward and please share the podcast. And even better, if you've been listening for a while, what I'd be very grateful if you would do this is go leave an iTunes review, and hopefully I've earned it, leave a 5-star review. If you look at our reviews on iTunes, I have a 5-star review in terms of all of them together, and I have near 1,000 reviews. But the more reviews, I believe it affects the algorithm and we can reach more people. Okay, a couple of ideas. I mentioned in another episode, I learned this from Don Javier, and I have mastered this over the years, is he taught us many years ago, those that work with him, if you want to start mastering gratitude, have it in front of you. And he said, what's the one thing you have in front of you all day long? You would die without it. Is water. And he said, every time you fill up your water container, your water jug, your water glass, just stop for a second, look at the glass, and thank the water. And I would thank the water for me, for my survival, my sustenance, and keeping me alive. But you can actually thank the water for whatever you want, but thank the water. And something else that I do that I learned from him, it's a habit now, is every single morning before I get out of bed, and it's an anchor now, it's a trigger. When I put my feet on the ground, what I do is before I stand up, my feet go on the ground and I stop for a second and I say, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm grateful for this day. Take a deep breath. Exhale, put my feet on the ground, and that is how I start my day. Okay, so with the water, you can do stickies. That's how I did it. I put sticky notes everywhere that there's water in the house. I put sticky notes to remind me to be grateful and to say thank you every time that I use water. And for anything else, set an anchor, which is our alarms on our phones. You got a phone. We all have phones. Use your phone to set the alarm if you need to. But that's the way to start habituating, because we learn, as you know, through other episodes, we learn through habit. Okay, do this every single day and focusing on this, but do it with, you know what, I'm grateful. I'm truly grateful for this. It's not just an exercise. I'm doing this to learn, Ratitude. I'm doing this to embody this. I'm doing this to start living from this place. I promise you, your life will start changing. And I say that to everyone listening, because every single one of you, and I can elongate this and say a lot more, and I'm not, because of timing for this episode. But you know what? I don't care who you are listening. There's always something to be grateful for. One of my interviews one time that I did, this is probably 10 years ago, Oprah said of this guy, she said he has she said this, it's the worst case of child abuse I've ever seen in my life. And this was near the end of her career of the Oprah show. And I interviewed this guy. I don't want to mention his name. I don't know what he's doing these days. But you know what? He was one of the most jovial, sweetest, kindest people. And when I was talking to him, he goes, you know what? I wouldn't be who I am today if that didn't happen to me then. I'm grateful for the earlier part of my life. And that was like mind-blowing. And that Oprah said it's the worst case of child abuse, and I agree, I know his story, that she's ever seen, and he's grateful. Which, by the way, I've said before, and I'll wrap up here just a couple of more minutes, is Don Javier has always said that to me. And that's been a life, that's helped me big time when he said, every single thing that happens to you, everything, not some things, not picking and choosing, every single thing that happens to you happens so that you can grow and evolve spiritually. Okay, your transformational takeaway. I have a question for you. I'm going to slow down here. I'm going to say it slowly. Ponder this question. What if you woke up today with everything that you were genuinely grateful for yesterday? What if you woke up today with everything you were genuinely grateful for yesterday? What would you wake up with, and what would you have right now in front of you? Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this entire podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with your friends and family. You know, if you found value, they will too. So please share via your social media channels. Also, if you have questions, I'm here to assist. You can email me questions to support@jimfortin.com, and I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. Also, if you want transformational content like this daily, connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram name is I am Jim Fortin. Finally, I do have a personal request. I believe that we're all here to help others and to grow and evolve ourselves. Together, you and I, let's help more people. If you would please leave a review on iTunes, and a good one, by the way. I'd be grateful, and through your assistance together, we can transform more lives. Thanks for listening.